Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, it obviously comforts Dan Orlovsky to a certain extent that he's no longer the only quarterback in recent NFL history to run out the back of an end zone. But was it really as bad as the Orlovsky play, or are we just kind of lumping it in because his foot stepped out?
So in one sense, it's not as bad because Orlovsky is like running along the back the entire time, and so you'd think he'd have like a better awareness of where it is. But in another sense, it's much worse because he also threw a pick six. And the only reason it wasn't a pick six was because it was a safety. What are you supposed to do?
I'm starting to think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you are a national writer now for Pro Football Network. I'm starting to think that the Denver Broncos are now winning just in spite of themselves.
I think so. I mean, okay, I will say that like Russell had like a pretty good fourth quarter, but like, good Lord, there were so many teams this week, including the ones we're going to talk about, that like tried their best to lose. They made bad decisions. They just played bad football. Week 1 was really fun for football, and week 3 is how we're paying down that debt.
The rent comes due.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened here. So welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We are excited for what's coming up this week. We're going to London. We're going to be covering the London game. We're looking forward to meeting some of you. We're looking forward to doing a show. We're looking forward to grabbing a drink and laughing about the absurdity and the condition we have found ourselves in, flying 4,000 miles, in my case, in order to watch the Vikings play the Saints. Specifically, to watch Jameis Winston play. So, here we are. But before we get to any of the review of the Lions game, which the Vikings were victorious, let's just get into a little bit of shilling here and talk about Patreon. If you enjoy the show and would like to financially support the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for any amount you'd like per month, or you can go with the year subscription. Most people go with $3.50, Tree Fitty, which does help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay and gets you access to things like bonus episodes, gets you access to the Discord, and other fun stuff that we're doing over on Patreon. So, patreon.com/NorseCode. Check that out. William Wrigley, thank you so much for signing up over on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. That is a one-time donation over to us. You can also go to norsecode.threadless.com if you'd like to have a Norse Code t-shirt, Norse Code cup, baby onesie, shower curtain. There are possibilities that are available over at norsecode.threadless.com, or you can be one of the awesome people to buy us a drink after the Saints game, October 2nd at the Antwerp Arms. Again, that's Antwerp Arms on October 2nd after the Saints game. We're going to be over there. We're going to have some people over there. We're going to set up a couple of speakers around the room, and we're going to have a little live show. We're going to talk about what happened in the Saints game. We're going to take some questions from the audience. So your voice could appear right in your podcast feed if you head over to Antwerp Arms October 2nd after the Saints game. So we're really looking forward to that. So all shilling aside, let's get into the review of the Lions game, because this was a team that I'm speaking of the Vikings here that I had completely written off after the first half. This was a defense that looked terrible. This was an offense that was barely hanging in there, and it seemed like this was an insurmountable number of points to come back from, even though it was only about a 1-2 score game for most of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's kind of what happens in these games where the feeling that you get from the game kind of overwhelms the like actual obstacle, I guess, from it.
Like the reality in front of you, yeah.
Right, yeah. Like, So technically at halftime, I mean they're tied, right? Because of like a Dalvin Cook run with like a minute left to go, because with about I want to say 9 minutes left in the second quarter, but the game starts off 14-0. The Lions are running all over the Vikings. It also happens to reinforce some things that we've learned about the Vikings, which is their inability to defend against the run, Kirk Cousins's issues against pressure. It felt like anything that the Vikings were doing was in spite of themselves, and anything the Lions were doing was because the Vikings were incapable of stopping them, right? And so at halftime, they're tied, and I don't think any Vikings, I shouldn't say any, I've seen a bunch of like crazy homers everywhere, but I feel like most Vikings fans did not feel secure that that was a 14-14 game. They go up 17-14, they go up 24-14 in the third quarter, and that definitely feels like it's over, right? Like 2 minutes left in the third quarter. The entire 50-minute span you have in the fourth quarter really felt like that was going to be it. And, things, probably change with a number of missed kicks. So, if Siebert makes one of the kicks, if Greg Joseph makes both kicks, which I don't want to like ding him too hard, they're both like 56 yarders, right? But that changes, I think, the way Vikings fans probably feel about the game in a bunch of ways that impacts field position too. But yeah, I mean, it really just felt like the Vikings just didn't have the juice.
And let's talk about Justin Jefferson for a moment, because this is now the second game in a row where it appeared that he had been completely stopped. And unlike the Eagles game, the Vikings were in a position where they could throw it to other targets, like Adam Thielen, who, touchdown regression candidate Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
Got himself a touchdown today. KJ Osborne had a couple of really great plays, especially near the end. Like, they kept throwing the ball to Irv Smith.
Again.
Munt got a couple of good moves in there too near the end. So instead of just tossing it up in hopes that Jefferson might still be there, they actually moved the ball around, and Thielen all of a sudden had points.
Yeah, with Jefferson not being an available option, it was nice to see Cousins move on to other targets. It was not nice seeing those other targets include Irv Smith and how that kind of turned out. I don't know how that storyline is going to, play itself out moving forward, because, we've seen Irv Smith take significant roles in games before, right? Like, it wasn't that long ago that Irv Smith, was like a 500-yard receiver, right? It was like a year ago that he was putting in that kind of performance. Now, it wasn't like, that's not, world breaking stuff. It's not like Mark Andrews type stuff, but 2 for 6 is pretty tough, especially when those aren't necessarily inaccurate passes. Maybe the broken thumb still impacting him and in his ability to like reel in these catches, right? Like that could be playing a pretty big role. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it was nice actually seeing those targets get distributed around. That was a big problem in the Eagles game. I think no one needs to really be reminded of that, but that was like a significant portion of the struggles, was that with Justin Jefferson not open and double teamed and bracketed or whatever you want to call it, Thielen was not throwing it to open receivers like Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne. Whereas I think through most of the game, it felt like he still wasn't taking advantage of what they could do. And it wasn't until kind of the later portions of the game that it really felt like those players were really given like a significant enough role to make up for the fact that Justin Jefferson didn't have much production. But it was like nice that had occurred at least.
And the running game too was operational. Dalvin Cook did really well up until the point where he was both he fumbled and was injured. Is there anything known more about his shoulder?
Not yet. As far as I can tell, we know it's a shoulder injury. I think it's the same collarbone that he had injured earlier. So one thing that I had learned from like researching Ryan Matthews' injury, if people remember back when he was a Charger, before he was an Eagle anyway, that he had suffered repeated collarbone injuries, and like before, the research that we had on injury proneness was not very complete, and so we did not have a good understanding of which injuries were repeatable and which were not. But that was that was an instance where one injury kind of reemerged again and again. So I'm looking at Dalvin Cook's injury history right now. So obviously we have the ACLs and the ankles, but he has a shoulder labrum tear in 2014 and in 2016, both, of course, while he was in college for Florida State. And then from there, we see an AC joint sprain in 2019 against the Chargers, and a shoulder dislocation in 2021, and another shoulder labrum tear also in 2021. So the same injury resulted in a labrum tear and a shoulder dislocation. So I guess it's not a collar injury; it's a shoulder injury. In which case, like, yeah, I think that this is probably just a repeated injury unless it occurred on the other side. Because it's not like load bearing when you run. It's not as if like an injury on one side increases the likelihood of the injury on the other side. But my memory of it is that it's the same shoulder. So that's something that is going to have to be something that we keep track of going forward. He was already projected by like Injury Predictor, which I believe DraftSharks.com bought, to miss 3.5 games in 2022, and this is kind of right on that track. So we'll see. But yeah, I believe this is also the third injury that occurred while he was fumbling, right? Like they seem to be pretty correlated.
Someone had made a comment that he was now the Xavier Rhodes of running backs, where if he was going to fumble, he was going to get hurt on
it. Yeah. The thing with the Xavier Rhodes thing is like people have turned that into saying that Xavier Rhodes would use injury as an excuse. And I think later on, maybe he did, but Xavier Rhodes was legitimately injured. And here, Dalvin Cook is clearly like legitimately injured in all of these instances. But I don't like the comparison because Rhodes turned into an example of a player that would use injury as an excuse, which is like, I don't think that's what's happening here. I think he just, when he gets injured, he fumbles, which I think is pretty fair. But he's also like 3 of his fumbles have occurred during these injuries, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like it's kind of tough to figure out, but it's not as if he's faking it.
No, and in this particular case, he was ruled out almost immediately.
Yeah.
So
he's brought into the blue tent, and yeah,
like that screams to me. I'm not saying that this is like, oh, it like his shoulder popped out of place or something, but like something happened. They're like, okay, well, you're done for the day. Like, really?
Right? Yeah.
He was still on the sidelines for the rest of the game, so, and was doing the Bane look with his hands on his hands up on his collar. So that's what he was doing earlier during the game. So whatever. But this was a game that Dalvin Cook was successful. At that point, he had something like 80 yards, and then Madison took over, and Madison did well too. And this is a guy that was getting some offers to be traded for this year, or the rumor was anyway that he was being shopped around.
Yeah, and I think that the rumors have progressed to the point where people were reporting that some teams had called, but the Vikings weren't biting. Dalvin Cook had 96 yards on 17 carries. That's 5.6 yards a carry. Alexander Madison, 28 yards on 7 attempts. Just 4 yards a carry, but it was his later attempts that when Madison took on the quote unquote starting role, right, the lead back role, that's when his best runs came. I think that's more a coincidence than anything. Like, it's not as if he runs differently based on whether or not he's the starter, but that's where his biggest runs came from, which was nice to see. It was a big part of the Vikings being able to kind of close out the game. And, he obviously had one of those touchdowns, which is a pretty incredible touchdown. Looked like he was going to get stopped, I think, at the line of scrimmage, and he was able to just spin and push for more. So that was really nice. I believe that was also his longest gain, that touchdown. It was like a 9-yarder. But yeah, I mean, it was really important that Madison be able to step up and do something about it. My guess, based off of Cook's injury history and the type of injury they announced and how quickly they announced it, not a doctor, obviously, is that Cook is going to be on a pitch count. It sounded like, based off of what Pro Football Talk had reported, that Dalvin Cook is planning on flying with the team to London. Now, they can change their mind. The team's not flying out to London until actually later in the process, until like Thursday or something like that. which, you know, I haven't done the science or the studies on it, and I haven't read the science of the studies, but that intuitively I kind of disagree with that. I feel like they should get acclimated to.
In the past, they've gone a lot earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, in the past they did their whole practice week in London. Yeah, but it feels like more teams are doing this. So there must be some kind of reasoning that they think that this will improve their odds of winning. I don't get it, but you know, like it takes a bit of time for like jet lag to catch up and impact you. Like I think is the theory, but whatever. Anyway, Cook is right now. The plan is for Cook to go to the London game, according to Mike Florio, but we don't know. We'll have to wait until, you know, they do some more medical analysis tomorrow, and then they'll probably tell us on Tuesday, and then he'll fly out on Thursday or something. But you know, my guess is that if he does suit up, he'll be on a pitch count, much like DeAndre Swift. So yeah, we might be able to see kind of the Kene Nwangu, Ty Chandler, Alexander Madison offense that everyone's wanted to see. But you know, this is a pretty good argument for why they, you know, wanted to wait for a better offer to trade him.
So the run game was there. The pass game was not terrible, and they were able to move the ball around away from Jefferson. It still seemed like Kirk was having to run for his life at times, though.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was primarily on these blitzes. So the Vikings have, you know, unshockingly, have not fixed their offensive line problems. Ed Ingram gave up. So these are all preliminary pressures. Pro Football Focus has not published this yet. So by the time many of you are listening to this, Pro Football Focus will have published their data on their website. This is preliminary, and those numbers will likely have changed because, you know, they go through review right before they get published. So these are preliminary. Treat them as such. But Ed Ingram gave up more pressures than anybody else in the Vikings offensive line with 4. So that's 3 hits and 1 hurry allowed. So that's 4. And then Brian O'Neill gave up a pair. I don't think those were necessarily his fault. Alexander Madison gave up 2, including one where Mike Hughes just destroyed him. You remember that?
I do.
That was wild. Like I watched the replay and I was trying to figure out like which player it was. I was like, man, was that Alex Anzalone? Which linebacker did that? And it was nickel corner Mike Hughes.
It took a moment to figure out who. Yeah, for me, I was trying to figure out who was the one who made him eat his lunch. Like who was the one who just like rocked him.
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, which linebacker did this to Madison, right? So I'm like, I'm looking like, no, I was like trying to figure out because I'd only seen the number 3 on the jersey at the time from my vantage point. So I was looking for which linebackers had the number 3 on the depth chart. And I think I looked and I was like, none of these guys make sense. And so I looked down again and I looked at the replay and it was 23. And I was like, that's a defensive back. What safety did that to him? Like it did not register to me that it was a corner, much less Mike Hughes, right? Like that was just crazy. So yeah, Bradbury gave up 1. Cleveland gave up 1. Well, they log Cleveland as having given up 1. I feel like I remember more than that. But the bigger issue was actually the blitz. So Cousins was not pressured significantly more often on a percentage basis than the average quarterback in the NFL is. But the difference is the time to pressure, how quickly, you know, pressure arrived before it got logged by like PFF as a pressure was remarkably quick. It was, I believe, like the 6th fastest in the NFL. Again, preliminary data. He didn't get sacked, so he did a good job. I'm going to say not getting sacked. Normally I'd say good job getting rid of the ball, but a lot of those were pretty dangerous. And it wasn't good. And again, I think we're left with this like weird problem. So Cousins was blitzed a ton in this game, and this is not a game plan adjustment the Lions made. This is what the Lions do. Through 3 weeks, the Lions are the heaviest blitzing team in the NFL. Now, against the Eagles, it made a lot of sense. A lot of teams will blitz Lamar Jackson a ton because it allows them to fill every potential rush lane. It quickens his process. He throws. He's not the most accurate quarterback among elite quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts, kind of a similar profile, right? And so you could say maybe that's not a game, but they did that against, Washington, right? And then you're just like, well, Carson Wentz holds on to the ball forever. You know, he gets sacked. We actually saw the Eagles game against the Commanders. And he doesn't have a quick process, so a blitz is a good way to But no, this is what the Lions do. They've blitzed more than anyone else in the NFL. They had a 43% blitz rate. I believe it led all teams in week 3. If not, it was one of the highest blitz rates we saw in week 3. And Kirk Cousins, once again, folded under the blitz. And we're getting a weird kind of, I don't want to say a narrative forming, a weird pattern forming that I think will turn into a narrative, which is going to be kind of frustrating. But I mentioned on the last show in one of the clips that went around that Kirk Cousins had minus 0.25 EPA per blitz. Now, that wasn't quite true. That was on a particular split that I had not accounted for, but it was still one of the worst in the NFL. I believe at the time it ranked 29th among all quarterbacks in the NFL that week in terms of EPA or expected points added per blitz. Now, I looked at the week 3 blitz numbers. So he gets blitzed on 43% of his dropbacks as opposed to 48 like the Eagles. And he has negative 0.45 expected points per attempt on blitzes. And now what's interesting is that you've got some elite quarterbacks that are worse here, but a lot of them just did not get blitzed very often. So, for example, Patrick Mahomes has negative 1.4 expected points added per blitz. It's the second worst in the NFL for week 3. Also, they only blitzed him twice because everyone knows you don't blitz Patrick Mahomes. In fact, I believe a story just came out at The Ringer or some other publication that teams just don't blitz Patrick Mahomes. So of anybody who got blitzed a lot, Kirk Cousins was the second worst in the NFL. Now, again, last week he was in a similar spot. By the way, that usually kind of begs who's the first. Justin Herbert, who of course was playing without ribs, so not really a fair comparison. Next to Kirk Cousins and Justin Herbert are Davis Mills and Carson Wentz. So not remarkable company. So are we just noticing that Kirk Cousins is bad against the blitz? Is this something that we've always known? Because we've always had an idea that he's not great under pressure. But if I recall correctly, a lot of the discussions people have about Kirk Cousins and pressure tell us that by a numbers perspective, he's actually surprisingly good under pressure. So are we confusing blitzes and pressure? What's going on here? So I looked at the 2021, his performance against the blitz, and in expected points added per attempt, it matched my memory, which was that he was 7th best against the blitz in expected points added per attempt, right? So he's 118.7 passer rating. He has 8.39 yards per attempt against the blitz. He's only taken 9 sacks against the blitz. He, generally speaking, actually does a pretty good job against the blitz, or he did last year. This year, we've seen 2 consecutive games where he does a really, really poor job against these blitzes. Now, a lot of these blitzes come with man coverage. A lot of these blitzes come with, they do man coverage, but they also double Justin Jefferson. I don't know what's going on, but I've never seen Cousins this baffled before, right? Like, there's a lot of criticisms I have of Cousins. Everyone knows that. But one of them is not that he looks like lost all the time, right? Like, he usually is fairly, I want to say decisive. Decisive is kind of the wrong word because it also implies that he's quick to make his decisions. He's not, but he's generally pretty good about making a decision and that decision being executed to some degree of competency. It's really just kind of, what decisions is he making, right? Is usually the issue, right? Like, he's throwing it over the middle of the field during a 2-minute drill when you don't have any timeouts left, right? He doesn't tend to throw like a ton of picks under pressure. He doesn't tend to throw a ton of picks, period. So these last 2 weeks, and maybe it's just a 2-week stretch, but these last 2 weeks are some of the worst Kirk Cousins play I've ever seen. And statistically last week, it was one of the worst games we've ever seen Kirk Cousins play. We went over that. I don't get it. Maybe it's just kind of this offense. So my theory is the generous interpretation, I think, is this. The good version of the theory is that right now Kevin O'Connell is trying to make Kirk Cousins a much more aggressive quarterback. As Cousins is figuring out what that means for him, how to become a more aggressive quarterback, he is making mistakes along the way until he recalibrates his risk-reward calculus, which hopefully he does, and hopefully that results by the end of the year in a better quarterback. That's entirely possible. He could take more risks, and in doing so, he kind of understands his limits. Now, one would hope that this would mean that he takes some snaps in the preseason. That's what that's for. But I guess not, right? And so if this theory is holding, that he is taking more risks, and certainly I think in the Eagles game, one could say that a positive from all the negatives is that he was attempting to be a little bit more kind of risky. It just didn't. It was bad, right? If this is the Cousins that we want, if the process for creating a quarterback that has all the positive qualities of Cousins and all the positive qualities of, we always go back to Case Keenum, but the positive qualities of Case Keenum, or to choose a topical quarterback, Brett Favre, somebody who mixes in good risk reward analysis and a gutsiness and arm strength and some ability to throw on the run. Maybe it requires this rough period in the middle. I don't know, but whatever it is, that's the best interpretation we can have. The other interpretations are he doesn't really fit in this offense for whatever reason, even though it's very similar to the previous offense. He doesn't cohere very well in the game planning process. The meetings or practices aren't being run well. Those seem like less fixable problems. That might persist throughout the year, or it could just be a streak, right? It could just be variance. But Cousins is playing really poorly against the blitz. I don't know why. It's very confusing because this is not who historically he's been, and teams are going to keep blitzing him more until he figures this out.
So the defense looked terrible for most
another
of
side of the ball. That's a good point.
Yeah, another side of the ball exists. Mm-hmm. We're not going to talk about Greg Joseph and his misses because I'm not ready to take on that L yet. I'm not
You have
personally
rostered him in your Hell League team.
He had minus 6 points. It could have been worse if they were, extra points, but just maybe I wanted to see you tie your career best twice, and I got nothing out of that. This was the game, by the way, that Brady Quinn on the actual broadcast was trying to postulate how the open doors of the stadium could potentially cause all of these missed kicks between both the Lions kicker and and Greg Joseph. This was something he was saying out to an audience nationwide. And there's this flags on top of the post. No.
So when this question came in, so spoiler alert, we got a question about this in the mailbag. I thought it was like kind of funny, right? I didn't really think about it because that's ridiculous, but I did. I was in the stadium at the time, so I looked up and I noticed that even in indoor stadiums they have the flags on the thing, and then I watched the kicks on replay, and I cannot believe Brady Quinn made me check the missed kick replays to see if the giant doors being open resulted in. No, they did not. Ridiculous.
Yeah. So anyway, we're not going to talk about special teams. Most of the special team stuff is settled. Apparently, Greg Joseph can't hit it from 56 yards. Fine. We'll deal with that. Whatever. Just hit it from 55, then we're good. Defense looked like butt. Defense looked terrible for 2.5, 3 quarters.
Yeah, 2.5, 3 quarters. Defense solidified right as the Lions were kind of walking into themselves. So the first moment the defense had success, I remember myself blaming the Lions for it because now the Lions are a team that obviously they love to run the ball a lot. So that doesn't shock me, but they were doing all of these intermediate range passes that were just killing the Vikings from the beginning. It's how they scored the first touchdown. And the first drive where they ended up punting or entering a fourth down, maybe not punting because they don't punt. They have the best punter in the NFL right now, by the way. No use for him.
No, because they're too busy going for it on fourth down.
Right.
There was no respect for the Vikings on fourth down.
Yeah, which, I mean, based off of what we saw, why would you, right? But yeah, so the first time they encountered a fourth down, I think it was the 4th and 5 where they threw it. I was going to say to Jameson Williams, he's not actually healthy enough to play yet. Where they threw it for a conversion, must have been Josh Reynolds, I guess. I don't know. The first time, the 4th and 5 is that on first down, they finally ran the ball and they didn't actually get, super far. And I was like, oh, the Lions are kind of like running into themselves. The Vikings told them exactly how to lose, or how they could beat them. And the Lions just decided to run for like -2 yards, right? So yeah, that one was like pretty weird, but yeah, for the most part, the Vikings were doing a very poor job of winning in coverage. And then as the game kind of evolved, they did continuously worse jobs at stopping the run and defending deep passes. All of these things that like seem like they're compounding problems, but by the fourth quarter, it seemed like I guess they had figured it out. The Lions still ended up with a relatively high success rate when running the ball. They ended up with a somewhat high EPA per play when running the ball. Thankfully, it's not a positive EPA per play, but still a somewhat high EPA per play when running the ball. And it wasn't until about the fourth quarter that had kind of changed, that the Vikings had done a better job clogging up those run lanes, that Jordan Hicks. So for the first 2 games of the season, Jordan Hicks has like made one good play and then he racks up a bunch of tackles on bad plays. Hicks made at least 2, possibly 3 really good plays in this game. So that was nice to see that he had kind of, and one of them was in the run game. So eventually they'd kind of figured it out. And it's one of those things where like, I remember seeing James Lynch rotate in for the first time and saying, and then, I was sitting next to John Krasinski and I said out loud to Krasinski, oh, they're going to run right at Lynch and it's going to work. And that's exactly what they did, right? Eventually, Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson rotate back into the game and they show up on the run defense. And it's really stark how much of a difference there is when those two are in the interior than when they're not. Again, Za'Darius Smith is not the world's best run defender from the edge position, but he actually didn't do a bad job here. Plus, he like led the team defensively in pressures. But yeah, that was a big problem. I will say though, Josh Metellus, good job. B, Lewis Cine. Let's talk about it. I'll talk about that in a second. But C, yeah, I mean, the Vikings actually, there was a question, I don't know if you put it in the document or not, but there was a question that we received about how the Vikings were unable to put pressure on, and that was not my experience watching the game. So I check the time to pressure, and I check the pressure rate, and the Vikings actually have a very fast time to pressure defensively against Jared Goff and an identical pressure rate, which matches kind of what I saw because Danielle Hunter was consistently winning and then Jared Goff was getting rid of the ball before that arrived. And in order for that pressure to hold up and turn into sacks, which they did a couple of times, the coverage needs to hold up, and a lot of times it wasn't. I think the issue with the Vikings has nothing to do, at least in defending the pass, has nothing to do with their ability to create pressure. They could always create more pressure. They don't have much of an interior pass rush. It would be nice to see Danielle Hunter, rip off another couple of sacks, but the pressure rate is fine. The real issue is the coverage is not holding up enough for that pressure to significantly impact quarterbacks or to turn into sacks. The issue is going to be the secondary, and it feels like it's going to be the secondary for a while, whether that's, Chandon Sullivan missing that touchdown early on, or it's Patrick Peterson being out of position for a guy who runs, 3 times as fast as he does, or Cameron Dancer for missing his assignment. Whatever it is, the coverage is the issue. It'd be nice if the Vikings felt comfortable with 3 safety sets, but apparently Lewis Cine is just not good at football. I don't understand it. It seems like he's not picking up the offense. I guess credit to the coaching staff for not playing him if they don't feel that he's ready. But this is like a pretty serious, significant scouting failure, right? Because they ended up picking a position at a player at a position that wasn't really a need. And that player is like not good so far. He's a rookie. Maybe he'll be good next year. Maybe he'll be good 4 games in the season, 5 games in the season, 8 games in the season. But right now he's just not ready to play for whatever reason. It doesn't sound like injury is the reason that he's not ready to play. It sounds like he's not ready to play. So that I think would go some way into being able to resolve the coverage issue. But in the meantime, on base downs, they have to have Jordan Hicks out there and he gets picked on in coverage. They have to have Chandon Sullivan play nickel and he gets picked on a little bit in coverage. Without another option, which Lewis Cine is supposed to represent, or which Andrew Booth, is supposed to represent. We didn't see a ton of him either. And remember, when Cam Dantzler was benched, it was a Caleb Evans, I think because of Andrew Booth's injury, but yeah, it was because he wasn't active for this game either. But like it felt like Andrew Booth wasn't ready to play back when he was healthy. So it very much feels like the Vikings just aren't at a spot where, despite investment at the position, they've got enough coverage to let that passing game go. And so, yeah, the Vikings are weak in run defense, and there's a couple of reasons why. I think primarily depth related, but the coverage is a huge issue. The pass rush to me it's not good. It could definitely get better, but it is not the issue here.
Yeah, the corners looked rough. I mean, Patrick Peterson, we had remarked last year that he looked slow. But this year, other than a couple of hits, like he looks like he's a glacier out there.
Yeah, it's I don't like and it's his straight line speed is, diminished. That part's true. But really it's his like turning and quickness that really seems glacial, right? Like it's his ability, which is like you're a cornerback, right? It's like you got to do that. You cannot not do that. It's his ability to turn and run or accelerate out of a turn that really looks like it's not fit. And so, yeah, it's better that he's in off coverage than in press coverage. It's a better fit for what his skill set currently is, but it doesn't look like he's athletically capable of competing. And a Caleb Evans isn't ready to play, and Andrew Booth isn't healthy. And yeah, this cornerback's like the Vikings next year. Which it always sucks to talk about it like this, right? Like 3 games in the season.
Well, next year is what the Vikings have to do. Talking about this, yeah, it absolutely sucks. Next year, however, at the draft,
right, they'll have to assess whether or not Andrew Booth is fitting their needs in terms of, I think, regardless of how good or healthy they perceive Andrew Booth to be, they need to draft a corner in the first 3 rounds. They need to draft a center in the first 3 rounds. And they should probably draft a guard in the middle rounds to compete with Ed Ingram, because that guy is not playing well right now. He's a rookie, right? So next year he might be fine. But Ed Ingram consistently leads the Vikings in pressures given up every week. Like that's an issue. The guy that you drafted in the second round is not ready to help you. So yeah, those are like 3 areas where they need to concentrate. And it's very annoying because it's the 3 areas that they concentrated on. They drafted 2 corners and a safety. Why is the secondary not like ready? The Vikings could still make the playoffs. That's the worst part.
So this was a game where Harrison Smith was out. He was out with a concussion. How do you feel the safeties handled his absence? And I mean, this seemed like an odd game for some of the linebacking choice too. It may be related, but you had Eric Kendricks like 25 yards downfield defending Amon-Ra St. Brown. He nearly got a pick off him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it works, it works, right? No. Yeah, I mean, some of it is the way that the opposing team rotates and how your coverage has to adapt, and they can get you in a bad rotation based off of the coverage that you called, and sometimes you just get caught. Right, which I guess technically they didn't really get caught because Kendricks did all right in coverage. But yeah, I mean the safeties were all right. The problem is that the safeties are not doing anything that materially helps the cornerbacks. Like a good safety will do his job and be fine. Right, a really good safety or a great safety will make up for the play of those around him. Will allow you to call coverages that are more difficult for the safety to perform, but easier for the cornerback to perform. And the Vikings weren't there, right? They were still asking the cornerbacks to do a lot. They were not asking the safeties to do a lot. And again, I mean, that's not like the fault of anybody. Like Josh Metellus was supposed to be the 4th string safety. As far as I'm concerned, he played remarkable, right? He was fantastic given kind of the expectations coming in. And even if you don't adjust for those expectations, he played pretty well. He led the team in tackles. They didn't seem like bad tackles to my eye unless I missed something. He grabbed the game-winning interception. Not a bad day, right? But they weren't allowed to, I shouldn't say not allowed to, but they weren't comfortable enough to call a lot of these coverages that help protect the cornerbacks a lot and use the safeties, remarkable range or instincts or playmaking capability to create a better defense on top of that. So the safeties did their job well, but the jobs that they were asked to perform were not particularly challenging or complex because of who they are. So I don't really have a problem. Like that's, your star safety is out, right? And your backup safety does his job. Incredible outcome, right? But that was one of the kind of tertiary issues that impacted all of the things that these cornerbacks had to do, and it impacted the coverage rotations they were able to get in, which would ultimately lead to something like an Eric Kendricks trailing a receiver. So it's not, hey, we don't like our cornerbacks, Kendricks, it's your job. It's, hey, we don't like our cornerbacks, which means we can only call these coverages, which means the safeties can only do this much. So when they adjust, we have to be in this coverage. And oh God, that means Kendricks is on a receiver. It wasn't like a one-to-one decision. It was a series of decisions that like can cascade down from the coverage options available to you. So the safeties did fine, but like, that all plays a role in kind of the problems that the Vikings had.
It was interesting to note that on that particular play where Kendricks almost got the pick, the two corners were 5-10 yards away from St. Brown. Just
these things just happen, I guess.
I remember just sitting
Anthony
there.
Barr.
Yeah, that. You know what? That's exactly what happened here. That it just happened to not totally bite the Vikings in the ass. So Jared Goff looked real. He looked like an actual, he looked like he belonged out there on the Lions as opposed to last year where he looked confused and like he didn't know what he was doing. He kept completing passes and the Vikings were doing nothing to stop him.
Yeah, it turns out he actually was really good against the blitz. He was 7th in the NFL for week 3 in performance against the blitz. The Vikings blitzed him 10 times. He completed 7 of his 9 passes, with one of those being a sack. So great job there. Under pressure, otherwise, he was not doing a remarkable job, and so the Vikings were better off with 7 in coverage or something like that, right? So when Goff was able to get the ball out on time, or when Goff was able to execute on play action, or when he was able to do some of the stuff that he was, doing really well with the Rams, that was really great stuff for him, especially the quick hitters. So he looked like kind of what you expect our understanding of like a modern system quarterback to look like when things are going relatively well. So credit to Goff for doing all that. That's great. But he's still, he's not like a creative quarterback, right? So that all is like part of the thing. The Vikings just let the Lions execute their game plan. They let the Lions kind of have a short passing game with an occasional deep shot that relied on play action in the run. And without a significant stop to that, that performance, Goff is going to be in his best possible situation where he performs pretty well, where he's got the ability to pull the ball and play action and throw it in the flat. And that guy gets, like 15 yards, right? Because of the yards after the catch. And within that framework, he did pretty well. I don't know that he did well when he was forced off platform and the Vikings were chasing him. When Dalvin Tomlinson is bearing down on him, he's not doing like the world's best job. I think on that play, he actually was able to execute a throwaway, but it was close. It was pretty touch and go there. So yeah, I mean, the Vikings were not able to do a good job blitzing him, but they, to their credit, decided to stop doing that when that wasn't working. And were able to get him off platform late in the game and get him to kind of mess up a couple of those throws. But yeah, for the most part, Goff looked, serviceable is doing a disservice to him, right? Like I think that he looked more than serviceable. He looked, exceedingly competent, right? Like maybe not more than that, but he did for most of the game. And, that's way better, like you said, way better than where they were last year with him.
So my biggest confusion with the way that this game ended involves the 4th down decisions that were being made by Dan Campbell. And he seemed to be doing fairly well for most of the game with it. This wasn't the Vikings defense that he felt like he should fear. And then he made a real weird decision at the end of the game, which ended up being the thing that caused the Vikings to win.
Yeah, it was so odd because like the Lions, they're very aggressive on 4th down. Generally speaking, they were super aggressive on 4th down in this game. And it like really was baffling when they ended up deciding, to kick it. And after the game, Dan Campbell, before he was even asked about it, he said, I freaking regret my decision there at the end. I regret that decision 100%. I really do. I hate it. I do feel like I cost our team. I really do, man. Which, the way he talks, yeah, how can you not like the guy? But, but like, yeah, he recognizes that. But it was just so uncharacteristic that, I think Next Gen Stats, they have a tweet midway through the game of all of his fourth down decisions, and he made the right one every time. We'll ignore the weirdness with like the quick field goal and the quick punt team. The decisions ultimately were the correct ones until you get to the end of the game because like what ends up happening is that field goal, if they make it, turns it from a one-score game into a slightly different one-score game. And the Vikings had already indicated that they wanted to score a touchdown regardless. And by wanted to score a touchdown, obviously every team wants to score a touchdown on a scoring drive. But what I mean is they would be calling plays with the touchdown in mind as opposed to playing a conservative brand of football that would settle for a field goal, which, Zimmer were like well known, right, to do that. If a field goal will do it, then don't take too many risks, just get the field goal. Here, the Vikings had committed to the idea of scoring a touchdown regardless if coaches are to be believed after the game. And in this case, I think they are, based off of the history of aggression that we have over the past 3 games. And so if that's the case, right, then this doesn't change anything because it goes from a 3-score game to a 6-point game, 3-point game to a 6-point game. And so like that changes your winning odds a small amount, right? Especially if the Vikings are aiming for a touchdown in either instance. All you're really like, if you possess the ball with 40 seconds left, 4 downs, there is a 99.9% chance you're going to win the game. If they possess the ball down 6 at their own 25, there's about a 75-80% chance you win the game. That is a huge difference in football, right? A huge difference. And so, like, and maybe I'm like, maybe teams don't score like 20% and go ahead touchdown drives, but like, still like that is like, I don't know why you wouldn't take the near 100% chance. And the only reason I'm not saying is 100% because I saw Patrick Mahomes engineer a 13-second comeback drive last year, right? But generally speaking, like, the possession is what was going to win you the game in that scenario, not points. And so it was really bizarre that he did that because from an ethos perspective, the way that Dan Campbell coaches, the way that the Lions team is generally run, which is like this trust the players that you have out on the field, trust your offense, trust your big guys to get it done, play with a lot of toughness, play with a lot of grit. Whenever you have an option between, being aggressive and not being aggressive, you be aggressive. Or you look at it from an analytics perspective, or you look at it from like a kind of a decision tree perspective. All of them would tell you to go for it there, and he didn't, and it was very bizarre. That resulted in the Vikings winning the game. Now, there are other mistakes that Dan Campbell made, like on a decision, I think it was like 4th and 7, he kept the offense out on the field until the last possible moment. He switched the punt team in really quickly, right? And the Vikings had to switch their, punt return team out really quickly. And the Lions got a delay of game, right? Especially because, by the time they set, they're required to allow 1 second for the opposing defense to set because they changed personnel, right? So that was a mistake. They took a delay of game. They gave the Vikings like 5 free yards. Also, on one of the field goal misses, right? I think the field goal miss, I should say. They waited, right? They waited until the last possible moment to rush the field goal unit, even though they had already called a timeout. This is, I don't know if we saw this on the broadcast, but what you saw in the stadium was they called a timeout and the offense just remains on the field. And so the Vikings defense remains on the field. And here's the thing. It's totally different to pull that trick with the punt team than it is with the field goal team. Because with the punt team, if you have the wrong personnel out there, you're not returning the punt, right? Like that is a 20-yard difference potentially, maybe more. If you have the wrong field goal team out there, a made field goal still gets made. Like the percentage chance that someone's going to block a field goal because they have the right personnel in, really small. Now, obviously, I mean, we just saw the Vikings do that, but remember the history of Vikings blocking field goals. It's not very long, right? It's been a bit since before that. The second thing is that the Vikings starting defense is their field goal block team. So there's actually nothing you're getting out of this. So they rushed the field goal team out there at the last moment to get them set up to kick, and then they missed the kick. I think that contributed to the missed kick. And which, like, Brady Quinn, please look at those sorts of things, right? Like, they rushed their kicker out onto the field and they missed the kick. So, like, it's not just that he decided to not go for it in the moment. The one moment you'd think anybody would go for it, especially somebody who's been so aggressive about doing that very thing. It's also that the way he decided to kick it minimized the odds that his kicker would be successful for minimal gain. I can see why you do that with the punt team. It just wasn't drilled correctly, or he'd waited a second too long, or the team took too long to respond to his cues or something, right? But with the field goal team, it doesn't make any sense to do it that way. You reduce the odds that your kicker is going to make the kick, and you don't like realistically change the odds that, they're going to be able to do something positive for themselves. So that one was odd. I mean, the Lions lost the game more than the Vikings won it. And I don't think there are going to be many Vikings fans who watch that game that disagree.
Final question from me, anyway, about the game. Was Adam Thielen right to be upset about the no call for the penalty on third down?
I'll say this. If I was in Adam Thielen's position, I would also be upset. I think that while watching it, I thought, I can see it, like watching it live, I saw it and I was like, I can see why there's no call. I can see why there's no call. Adam Thielen was pushing off at the same time Oruwariye was grabbing his helmet, right? So that's what I thought live. I see the replay in the stadium. I'm like, oh, no, actually, they should have called that. I see the replay on TV a couple of times, and I'm like, you know what? In a vacuum, you should call defensive pass interference. But, it was close enough that I get why it wasn't called. And in that case, yeah, he's right to be mad, but I don't think that, like, the refs were egregiously wrong, if that makes sense.
At the time, it looked a bit like a bang, like both of them were fighting, until you like take a look at the different angle. It's like, yeah, he was getting mugged, and there's no way the receiver was turned around.
Yeah.
Like, ugh. Any parting shots on the game before we head over to the mailbag?
When I say the Lions have like the best punter in the NFL, they really do. It's wild. But the thing about special teams that stands out to me the most is how crazy good Greg Joseph is at kickoffs. Like, the Vikings right now lead the league in opponent field position following a kickoff. That is like a difference of just 6 yards, but those add up. So Matt Daniels might be like the real deal. This is kind of cool. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, let's head over to the mailbag. And R. Menson asks the question, can we get a brief rundown on what the analytics say about all of Dan Campbell's fourth down decisions? I think it's the most I've ever seen in a single game in recent memory.
Yeah, so the best I've got is this next gen stats tweet that I'm going to put in the show notes. Quick story is what I said earlier. All of them were the correct decision. Two of them, the 4th and 5, and the 4th and 1 at the end of near the end of the second quarter with 5 minutes left. Both of those were really close decisions. So like the EPA, because I think before you get to the fourth quarter, you want to use EPA, not winning percentage. The EPA is within 1%. So it kind of is not a huge deal. But the 2 4th and 1s besides that were significant, like, go for it decisions, and he made the right one. But he made the right one for those first 4 go for it decisions. One of them obviously didn't succeed. Now, if he had actually gone for it on 4th and 7, I believe the analytics say that actually would have been a bad decision. But he didn't. It was just a punt fake. So yeah, the 4th and 5 was the most surprising one, right? It was at the Minnesota 32. It was a long 5. The next gen stat says the distance is actually 5.8 yards. So it was more like 6. Um, it's in the Minnesota 32. It's about a 50-yard field goal, right? Um, you'd expect a modern NFL kicker to generally kick that, or you expect teams to want their kicker to kick that. But I think that that's in kind of that, I guess, gray zone where you don't want to punt it. That's a crazy punting decision. We've seen some teams do that. And you don't want to really kick it because 50-50 plus is pretty difficult to ask of your kicker. And so you do want to go for it at these kind of weird extreme distances, because at that, like in the 33 to, and I guess this is 32, but in the 33 to 45 range, it is a really expansive range of go for it. So 4th and 7 in some of those in cases might actually be a good decision. But yeah, the 4th and 5 was really aggressive, but it was the right decision, made all the more correct because of course they converted it. But yeah, it was really aggressive, but it was correct. You almost never see a coach go for it when the analytics, quote unquote, the analytics say that they shouldn't. But we're actually getting close to a coach that's aggressive enough where we might be able to actually see it, which would be kind of cool.
It was interesting to watch him just continually do it, just continually go for it. A text from my buddy who's a fan of the Lions was basically like, to live and die in 4th down, like that. That's what's going to happen to this team, and you know what? Was totally right, and it killed him in the end.
Yeah, it did. Well, honestly, like it didn't, right? Because they bequeathed the sword right before they could really let the final 4th down decision define their season. But that's the funny part, right? Is that they chose to live and die by the 4th down, except at the very end they did not, and that's how they died. Very weird.
Justin Ekstrom asks, will the defense ever be able to adjust to each opponent week to week, or are they just going to keep it this way because it puzzled Rodgers once?
No, I mean, I think that they do try to make defensive adjustments. It's just that they've got a system that's going to make the defense look pretty similar, especially to, people who are not in the game plan meeting room from week to week, because they start every down in too high and then they rotate from there. But no, I think that they do adjust from week to week. And in fact, the Vikings have been very good defensively in the second half, which does not feel correct. Now, mind you, they got helped by missed field goals and stuff like that. So it's not as if, but like there were no points scored by Philadelphia in the second half, right? There were 10 points scored by the Lions in the second half. It doesn't feel right to say the Vikings defense has been good in the second half. And they, of course, have been helped by like some kind of weird moments where it's like a missed field goal or a fumble or whatever, right? But from play to play, they do seem to be playing better as well. So there are like halftime adjustments. And if there's halftime adjustments, it kind of follows that they do actually do some game plan adjustments. They do vary the amount they blitz. I would like them to blitz just more often, generally speaking, but they were right to kind of dial it down after a while. But they were not blitzing against the Eagles at all in the first half, and then they blitzed 5 times in the second half, and that worked. In this game, they were blitzing a little bit more at the beginning. It wasn't working. They dialed it back. And that's just one element of a complex game plan. So actually, I do think that they are changing it from week to week. It's difficult to tell sometimes because the way that structure makes it difficult to identify defenses.
Kenneth Allen asks, last week, the players and coaches said the issue with the defense was execution, not scheme. After another awful performance, which do you think is more to blame?
I mean, I think that the scheme does bear, ideally you wouldn't have to make halftime adjustments so often, right? If you could figure out mid-game kind of what your best strategy is to win on defense, in theory, you should have been able to anticipate what you would have needed before the game, begins. And of course, teams will change up what they do offensively week to week in order to prevent that very thing from happening. So there's always going to be an element of surprise. But the Lions do not have a particularly complex passing game. They do have a really complex running game, but it's not like defensive assignments in the running game do not significantly change based off of the running plays that they run, unless it's like a read option, and occasionally if it's like an influence block type, like a trap or a wham or something like that, right? So it's not like there's a lot to anticipate with the way that offense is designed, that you shouldn't be able to anticipate beforehand, that you would have to adjust for halfway through the game. So like clearly there are some schematic issues here, but I actually do think execution is playing a really big role, right? Like Shannon Sullivan was not lined up on the wrong person when he gave up a touchdown. Patrick Peterson is not, you know, playing the incorrect, like he shouldn't be playing man coverage instead of zone when he gives up that like what could have been a touchdown to Christian Watson. He just got burned regardless of the scheme that he was in, right? So I do think execution is playing a significant role. I think it's playing a bigger role than the scheme. But like, yeah, if you're making like these kinds of significant halftime adjustments every week, then like clearly your initial game plan was insufficient in some way, and probably you should have been able to anticipate it. But I do think execution is more to blame right now. I think the cornerbacks are just not good enough.
Cody asks, do you think that the trend of teams taking Jefferson out of the game will continue throughout the season? Or do you think O'Connell will be able to scheme him into some big games? Or, also, is Jefferson simply too good to be shut down every game like this?
Yeah, I think the fact that it happened like twice in a row is like why we're talking about this. But yeah, I do think that like that won't sustain itself. I think that if there were no adjustments made to the way Justin Jefferson is used going forward, he will produce. He will produce 100-yard games, right? That said, just because that's true doesn't mean you couldn't do more to help him out. Like as famously as Arthur Smith said last week when asked why Kyle Pitts wasn't targeted, this isn't fantasy football. The goal is to win games. You're not really, the intent is not to make sure Jefferson has 100 yards. It's to make sure that you score as many points as possible when you're on offense, or drain the clock, or do whatever you need to do in order to win games. And if that means teams triple team Jefferson, I wouldn't do anything. Like if they put 3 players on Jefferson, if you're in a 3-by-1 set, 1 receiver on one side, 3 receivers on the other side, and they've got 3 defenders covering Jefferson, I would be comfortable with Jefferson getting no yards in that scenario. Fine, right? Because you are going to kill them with all your other receivers. So, the goal is not to get Jefferson yards, but it is very unlikely that you'll be doing a good job without Jefferson at least producing a little bit from week to week. And O'Connell said after the game that he just wasn't doing enough to put Jefferson in a place to succeed. Now, part of this is like coaches appropriately should take blame after games. Like it's just kind of like, kind of a basic rule of like leadership in these scenarios, which is like when we win, it's we, when we lose, it's me sort of thing. But I think that he's right that, a lot of times we saw Thielen in motion, not Jefferson. A lot of times, we didn't see like the routes off of the routes. Like they established some Jefferson staples in the game, right? Like he's running behind the line of scrimmage on, I think Matt Waldman called it the Jerry Rice route, but we saw Andy Reid do this a lot with like Kelsey, where they're running behind the line of scrimmage and then he's open in the flat at full speed. Well, he's covered. Well, do that again, but run the alternate route, run the counter, run the constraint play version of that where he runs a different route, even though it looks like he's running that initial route. Like do more to make sure that teams can't anticipate what he's doing instead of just running his staples. So, yeah, I think that Jefferson is probably too good to be shut down in every game like this, but I also think that that's not enough of an answer for the coaching staff, that they need to do more to put him in positions to win.
The next question is going to be from Swedman Bob, who asks, is CJ Ham now above Justin Jefferson in the depth chart, having outgained him today?
Obviously. I mean, CJ Ham's a captain. Justin Jefferson's not.
Yeah, it's Captain Ham out there. Luke Braun's dad asks, how do the doors open in a stadium affect wide right kicks? If so, can we get those closed on Vikings kicks and opened for the opponents?
So like I said, it didn't have a meaningful impact, but also it is actually literally the NFL rules that you cannot change that partway through the game.
Otherwise, Jerry Jones would have found a way to do that, as opposed to just blinding everyone who plays at the Cowboys Stadium for like the third quarter.
It would be really funny to have like a shutter system that only when is that time when it's that direction of the field it's closed, when it's not, when your offense is going in the other direction it's open.
You have to think that a lot of money was spent regardless, trying to figure out ways to potentially make that work.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, what was the accusation that when the Twins were playing in the Metrodome that the air was blowing?
Yep.
Yeah.
That these things are researched. Just saying. Plagued asks, why can't we scheme an offense that isn't depression era hopeless?
So I wrote this in my piece at Pro Football Network. The really terrifying thing is if we have one more game like this, we're going to begin to say stuff like, hey, Kirk Cousins was better under Zimmer than he was under O'Connell. That's like weird, right? Now, right now, we can call it a fluke or we can call it adjusting to a new offense or we can call it a bunch of different things where that's not the case. But like, it's on alert. The take is nearly there, right? That, hey, man, maybe this Kubiak style offense where they lean more on the running game and it's condensed formations. There's not a lot of receivers out there. You're doing play action traditionally a lot more often. It's not shotgun very often.
Running on second and long.
Yeah, maybe that's just better for Cousins, man. Maybe he just produces more in that system. Maybe O'Connell's not actually a great offensive head coach. He's just a good offensive coordinator. Maybe. We'll see.
That'd be nice and troubling. DJ Durham asks, did the Vikings purposefully fall behind and manufacture a comeback in an attempt to emulate, maybe honor is the better term,
Right.
To emulate James Madison University's win over Appalachian State?
James Madison University, by the way, came back from 28-3.
Yep.
To win, was it 32-28?
Yeah, they were a lot of unanswered points there. It was brilliant.
Phenomenal. It could be an homage to JMU, but certainly I wouldn't try to emulate JMU. There's only one Duke, so can't do it. That would be impossible, an exercise in futility.
I will say, however, that Ben DiNucci is apparently going to be at the tailgates this next weekend at James Madison. So if any listener runs into him there and gets something signed and then gets that to me, immediate entry into the North Code Hall of Fame, and we will financially compensate you for it. Also,
I would also add, and maybe
within
edit
reason.
this. Yeah, and I would also add and edit this out if it's not working. I like a free induction into the Hell League if they want it.
No, well, I am willing to. I'm willing to bend the rules and get somebody into the Hell League for some signed Ben DiNucci swag from this tailgate. So that's all I'm looking for. And this is endorsed by DiNucci himself. He liked the tweet that said this. So
yeah, right? Yeah.
This is endorsed by the man himself. Also, Timothy asks, did the NFL watch the Key and Peele skit and believe that it was due time to give an excessive hip thrust penalty?
One can only conclude yes, right?
That was pretty, and the fact that Brady Quinn immediately said something about that on the telecast. It's like, oh, it's like that Key and Peele sketch with where they decide, yep, that's one too many. It's like, this is
all right.
Yeah, I'm done with Brady Quinn. I'm tired of saying his name on one of these episodes. If I can just make it through the rest of the episode, I'll be happy. Mark says, my dream for the 2023 Super Bowl is to be the Sadness Bowl. Vikings versus Bills. One team wins their first Super Bowl and the other loses their fifth straight. What is the ideal outcome for this perfect storm of sadness? Also, I am excited to be the first team to have an 0-5 Super Bowl record. P.S. I will never forgive the Eagles for taking away our ability to be the first team to lose a home Super Bowl.
So did the Buccaneers win a home Super Bowl, or was the first one the Rams? Okay, so the Buccaneers, and then
it was Bucs and then the Rams.
Did the Rams win a home Super Bowl? Was that a home Super Bowl?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting that it didn't happen for like 60 years and then it happened twice in a row. So yeah, I mean, obviously the Vikings would have lost that game and would have gone down in history as not only the first 0-5 team, but the only team to have lost a home Super Bowl. That would have been amazing. I think that, like, cosmically speaking, you can't have a Vikings Bills Super Bowl. It's kind of like an immovable object and an irresistible force, right? The twain cannot meet because one precludes the existence of the other. Now, while that is a logical impossibility, we are here talking, or a metaphysical impossibility, we are here talking about a cosmic impossibility, which is different. The fates would decree that the Vikings and the Bills cannot play each other. If both end up in the respective championship games, the outcome of one will determine the outcome of the other. So, yeah, I don't know that we can have a Vikings versus Bills Super Bowl, at least not while they remain 0-4. If one of them gets off the schneid, I'm going to say the Bills. Then that kind of breaks the chain, and you can end up having them play each other, but you cannot have the two 0-4 teams play each other in the Super Bowl. So I think that first of all, is that we're discussing an impossibility. The second, in terms of an ideal outcome for the perfect storm of sadness, is that we test the NFL playoff overtime rules, where it's like sudden death, but like just nobody can score. And it just goes on and on and on until you end up kind of like the Eisner Wimbledon game that went like hours and hours and hours and hours. You end up just deciding to kind of pack up and play the rest of the Super Bowl the next day. And then everyone just kind of decides it's a tie.
Yeah. Like it's either that or the eventual heat death of the universe.
Yeah.
So
that's the ideal outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's either that or a missed kick is the reason why one of them wins.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that would be pretty good for both of them. And by good, I mean like traumatizing to a level unforeseen in the history of sports.
Yeah, maybe they adopt the rules for the Hell League for that particular game. Just
love it.
Yeah. Andrew Schuba asks, did Thielen and Irv Smith coordinate an elaborate heist to sneak into O'Connell's office and swap Jefferson's name in the playbook with their own?
I would question Irv Smith's heist capabilities at this point. I don't know that he's got that. I don't think he's got that dog in him. I don't know that he's a heist person at the moment. Thielen, I could believe though, that 100%.
DJ asks, for Arif's Midwestern hospitality corner, do the Vikings typically make arrangements for opposing players that are somehow left off the team plane as it departs? Definitely not asking for, I believe that was number 24 on the Lions.
Yeah. The Vikings obviously would. Like, they're a Minnesota team. They're nice. It's Minnesota nice. You'd make accommodations. Now, because it's Minnesota nice and not hospitable, right? Like, there's a difference, right? It would be like not at the Omni, the hotel right next to the Vikings facility, but like a Super 8 nearby. Not great accommodations, but
better than the Bloomington La Quinta.
Right. You'd feel awkward complaining about it because it's free, but it's clearly like, well, okay, but if I just paid for it, it'd be better. Like it's going to be at that line where it'd be precision calculated like any Minnesotan would to find the cheapest possible accommodations that people would feel bad complaining about.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. Just enough to like, really? Okay, well,
Thank you.
Is there a breakfast buffet at least? Okay, but are there non-smoking rooms? That's
right, exactly.
That's what I want to know, because that first floor of the Red Roof is smoking, and that stuff's not cool. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. But I mean, the dude had 5 penalties on him at one point, so
yeah, maybe
the Vikings spoil him because he was the best player on our team for a couple of plays.
Yeah, give him a little coupon.
Yeah. From LaBeouf, question for Arif's all-clad stainless steel enthusiast corner. Not a corner we visit very often. If prominent members of the Vikings were specific types and brands of cookware, what would they be?
Okay, so I did think about this a little bit too much. In fact, I was thinking about this so much that in the pre-show prep that James was like, all right, and he got up and left to go to the bathroom so I could finish this. Here are my thoughts, right? So I love cookware. I have a bunch of cookware in my house, obviously. I read a bunch of reviews. I watch reviews from America's Test Kitchen, and read the reviews from Wirecutter. This is important to me. Uh, I'm going to start off with some of the complimentary ones. I think that Justin Jefferson, all clad. I think that's easy, right? D3 or D5 all clad are uh, I forget the name of it, but they have a uniform thickness and a weight, and they've got a conductive material on the inside and an insulating material, or I shouldn't say insulating, but a different material on the outside that produces in every test again and again um, low variance, high durability, good value to lifetime use ratio, predictability, great handling, anything that you want. They clean easy relative to other dishware of the same type. Just perfect stainless steel kind of a skillet, like an ideal stainless steel skillet, right? I would say KJ Osborne is like a TFAL, so T-FAL, a nonstick skillet. Incredible value for money. It's not going to be your best performer, but like if you're stuck with it, you're never in a bad place. But you can always upgrade, right? So it's good to have. Adam Thielen, OXO Good Grips, dollar for dollar, the best cookware I think on the planet that applies to their utensils too. This is an OXO Good Grips Stan podcast. So long as they, as a company, don't do anything problematic, I'm not going to stick myself to that. But they're just an incredible brand that it like sometimes will outright win quality tests against brands that are 5 times more expensive. But generally speaking, on the lower or the budget end, produce much more dollar for value than anything else. They're incredibly reliable. They can do all kinds of things, very versatile. I think that's obviously Adam Thielen. I think Eric Kendricks is a Lodge cast iron. Does a lot of things for you. Can't do everything. Eric Kendricks can't really pass rush for you. He's not the biggest linebacker. He's not taking on all the blocks. Lodge can't do everything, but it can do almost everything. And in terms of the use that you get out of it, the cost is just a great value. It is a little expensive, but the cost is just a great value. Now we're going to move on beyond the compliments. Dalvin Cook is probably a Le Creuset. Like too expensive, nice to have. Not as durable as you'd think, right? Especially if you get the enameled. But like it's a great kind of status dishware to have. A lot of really great cooks have Le Creuset dishware. It's really nice to see. It's really fun to use. It's very easily replaced by significantly cheaper dishware. I'm sorry, but they are kind of a status for cooks. It is kind of cool, but they're just like way too expensive. Jordan Hicks's Calphalon, a kind of cookware that has a lot of uses. But it's generally overrated. It's not that expensive, so it's not like that big a deal if you have it. But you could stand to upgrade from it. I was trying to figure out kind of who Green Life would be. I actually really dislike Green Life cookware. They're really pretty. They're really cheap. They break down way too easily, and they're really inconsistent. To me, that's like DJ Wanham, right? Because when he was drafted, Andre Patterson would talk about how awesome he looked, how cool he looked. He only cost a 4th round pick. He doesn't cost that much in contract value. And he's like, yeah, he's got this chiseled body. He's really long arms. Reminds me of Danielle Hunter. Just this like really fantastic looking player. And it's like, well, but he doesn't like play well, and he still hasn't. But like, he's pretty useful to have in a pinch. Like you could do a lot worse than Green Life cookware, right? Like in terms of budget cookware, it's in the middle. It's not at the bottom. It just looks great, right? It's not a liability, right? But it looks way better than it is. Kirk Cousins is a Swiss Diamond. That's the Teflon coated cookware that has diamonds in it.
Is that the one? I'm pretty confident you can purchase that at Walmart too, so I feel like that's on brand.
Yeah, and it's insanely expensive regardless, but yes. Crazy expensive despite being kind of a generic seeming version of it. And there's like a use to the diamonds, right? Like there's a reason that the diamonds are there, but like it's way more expensive than it needs to be. It doesn't actually perform like you want it to. It really is good within its core application, but if all you're getting for it is its core application, then you should just buy a cheaper one like an OXO Good Grips that does the same thing for a lot less. And then in kind of the more fringe applications, it does awful. And it's a little bit more fragile than you expect it to be, which I guess technically Kirk Cousins isn't fragile, but in terms of, him breaking down against pressure or being in 2-minute situations, that works out. And then Ed Ingram to me is Amazon Basics. Not good cookware. Seems like a good idea at the time. Didn't cost a lot. And the more you dig into Amazon's history, the kind of skeezier it is.
Wow, that I was hoping that there was going to be something in there near the end that was going to make me stop, and I want to congratulate you. That was far more thorough than I'm positive even LaBeouf would have asked for, but I want to congratulate you on that.
There we go.
Dr. Aaron Matson asks, with Ted Lasso and AFC Richmond being included in FIFA 2023, what fictional American football teams would you like to see included in the next Madden game?
So I'll say this about Ted Lasso. I love Ted Lasso. The show is great. I thought they did a really great job in the second season after it seemed like they weren't going to. The people who like Ted Lasso a ton are so annoying. It's very difficult to talk about how much you like the show because the people who talk the most about the show are like make the show seem unpalatable. But I recommend Ted Lasso. It's good.
I have a whole like season of that just downloaded on my tablet for the flight. Like I'm just gonna do that and sleep. It's gonna be great.
Perfect. So I was thinking about this. We went over some fictional teams before the show. First of all, there's just no team that's going to be as fun or as good or as personable as the AFC Richmond team to include in FIFA because you end up learning about basically everybody who plays a significant position. There's not really a ton of fictional football teams, especially if you restrict yourself to professional football teams. So like, I guess technically the Remember the Titans team is not fictional, but like, in the construct of a movie universe, it is. So you learn a lot about the different players, the different positions there. But if we restrict ourselves to professional teams, you've got the Miami Sharks from Any Given Sunday. You've got the Washington Sentinels from, the replacements. You've got, this one was really funny when I thought about it, the Gotham Rogues from The Dark Knight Rises, which there is one player you learn about, the one who lives.
Yeah, Hines Ward and everything. But my question, even in the pre-show, was like, so because this is the one thing they're famous for, is this like a new Madden game?
You got to program the stadium collapse into Madden if you've got the Gotham Rogues.
Yeah, you have to fight. Yep, This is the new Madden like. This is like the new Madden like side challenge or whatever. It's like the coffin kicks.
You're Hines Ward.
You're Hines Ward, and you're trying to avoid the collapsing stadium. You're just like hitting the turbo button or whatever. Just got to spin out, watching all of your comrades fall. Like, but it doesn't matter because you're going to the end.
And this is critical. You have Hines Ward's stats. So why was he the kick returner? Nobody knows.
It's the fastest he's ever run in his entire life. Or it was at Hines Ward's speed and everyone else should not have been playing.
Yeah, exactly. They would have been blown out in the modern NFL. So I'm going to go with the London Silly Nannies from Family Guy.
See, that's a much better answer than the Minnesota State Screaming Eagles with Craig T. Nelson.
That's a college team. We can't technically. But
yeah,
yes,
I suppose. Also, Don from Ohio asks, and actually a good question this week. I don't know.
So we had a listener ask if Don from Ohio is fake. The one that asks the good questions is fake.
Yeah, this obviously I made this one up. Don from Ohio, in quotations, asks, did this win remind you more of the Brad Childress era or the end of the Mike Zimmer era?
So I think this is a really good question. The end of the Mike Zimmer era included a bunch of close games against teams that they shouldn't have been close against. And some of them were losses and some of them were barely wins. And you just felt bad afterwards. So I definitely get that. But the Brad Childress era did include a bunch of unearned comebacks. And that just generally seems like a better fit. So this does feel more like the Brad Childress era to me. Maybe not the Brett Favre version. Again, weird to bring up right now, but whatever. But kind of like the Gus Frerotte version or the Tavares Jackson version, where it's like they've got no business competing, but good job. But I really do empathize with the Mike Zimmer answer here, especially because the Vikings did have 2 close games against the Lions, one of which they lost, which happened to be the Lions' first win of the season, which the viral video of Jared Goff's girlfriend at the time, probably still his girlfriend, I don't know, did remind us that was their first win of the season. So, I mean, both answers are good here, but I'm going to go with Brad Childress.
Sean asks, with the butt punt joining the NFL butt playbook,
famously,
is it possible that we will ever see a butt kick?
Oh, I think it's super possible, right? Like all it takes is for a kicker to slip a little bit, or for the cleat to turn the wrong way, or for a toe to drag on the grass when it shouldn't. So you plant your leg a little bit too far out, and the kick's trajectory changes and goes right into the butt of the long snapper. That seems totally likely to me.
I can, for whatever reason, I can totally see this happening at Soldier Field.
Yeah, that sounds, especially with a slip. Yeah,
yep,
for sure.
Let's go to Tank B, who asks, for a Reef's job change corner, I am the favorite to get a new job with a government contracting agency that requires low-level security clearance. No, the irony is not lost on me. As such, I have scrubbed and locked down my personal Twitter, and my Facebook has already been locked down, so you can't see anything unless you're my friend. As the most current expert on abandoning your old job for something new, what am I most likely forgetting?
As someone who was also doxxed, which is what you're trying to prevent happening, doxxed, you're forgetting the web archives of your tweets and Facebook account. You should request to the Wayback Machine to remove any potential archives of your Twitter account and potentially Facebook account, which you can do by emailing them and saying this contains my private information. I've done that, but I did that too late, and now a bunch of people who hate me know my address. Please do not Google that. Thank you.
You're appealing to the Minnesota nice aspect of that. Please just leave me alone.
Look, if you want a place to stay, I'll let you give, but just please don't look up my address.
Instead, why not buy him a beer over at Antwerp Arms on October 2nd?
Hey, do that.
Yeah, just do that. We're much happier with that. Finally, from Roro, for a Reef's beekeeping corner, what are the benefits and challenges of raising a hive inside of a goalpost?
Well, the challenges are that the bees will get their bell rung every time a college kicker comes up to kick. But we saw a bunch of really great doinks this weekend, both college and the NFL. The doinks are the biggest challenge. The pros. So the second biggest challenge probably is the lack of flowers nearby. Trying to think of the positives here. You don't have to do that much structural work, so the caloric energy of gathering, pollen and stuff like that is not going to be wasted on too much structure there.
I mean, if the opposing players happen to have somebody who is, say, allergic to bees, they are most likely going to try to avoid that particular side of the field.
Yeah. One element of home field advantage here would be making sure that none of the players that you sign have allergies to bee stings. And so you can construct the only team immune to your own goalposts. That is an advantage. Maybe you could do both goalposts. Just, hey, you don't want to score a touchdown? You could die, sort of deal.
Yeah, it's a bit like using the oxygen in Denver, which certain players just cannot play because of the trait that they have. I believe that's sickle cell. Was that, or was that something else?
No, that's sickle cell, and there's both sickle cell and sickle cell trait, where sickle cell is a condition that will essentially always impact you in terms of the amount of oxygen that you can extract from your lungs, and sickle cell trait is the capacity to pass down sickle cell to your offspring and will occasionally impact you, especially in low oxygen environments, like happened to, was it Ryan Clark?
I can't remember if it was Ryan Clark, but there was a prominent football player who kept not being able to play in Denver, which
It is Ryan Clark, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, this is just building in another bit of home field advantage. That I mean, can the league do anything about this? You did see what this is referencing to, right? Over in Tampa Bay.
What? No.
How did you not? Okay, hold on. Let me be the one to, because you're just thinking this is dumb as hell.
Yeah, this came out of nowhere for me.
Okay, well, I actually get to go to my Twitter now and find this because this was sent over to us. And I had labeled it as B content.
Content.
Well, I mean, listen, as somebody who's involved in
it's appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, we not only do we get missed kicks on this show, not only do we get people sending James Madison stuff over to us, but we get B content. And in this case, we actually had a meeting of the B content and the football people. So here, I just sent you the link. This link will be in the show notes of what is being described as a beehive inside of a goalpost in Tampa Bay.
How does that happen?
Right? This is a tweet from Pro Football Talk.
What? How did I miss this? How did no one at me? All right, I'm going to check the replies to see.
Yeah, when you scroll down in the replies. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the second one on my Twitter is someone adding me. Oh, man. I'm sorry I missed it, people.
Bees? This is amazing. This is next step. I wonder if this is part of that TB12 thing.
Has to be. TBs, right?
Oh, God.
That's your fault.
So the negatives involve the ability to have more puns.
Yep.
Well,
and the positives. In addition, also positives.
Fine. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. I hope you have enjoyed it, despite the pun at the end. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I'm doing kind of like a Monday morning. Is that trademarked? I don't want to say Peter King's column. Style column that'll go over everything. I already have a piece up about the Vikings-Lions game, about how we haven't learned anything about the Lions or the Vikings, really. And I don't know. It seems like I'm going to get a piece up every day of the week. I don't know. It'll be difficult because I'm going to be traveling this week. And so there's going to be a little bit less content for me from Pro Football Network than you'll see in the coming weeks going forward. But like I said, there's a piece I'm really excited to write that's going to have me travel around England for a little bit to get that done. So that's going to be coming up probably next Sunday. So stay tuned to Pro Football Network, which is free, unless you don't want it to be free, in which case there is a Pro Football Network pass that gets you some exclusive stuff. Or you could just give me money. That's cool too. You could cancel your subscription to The Athletic, Venmo me some money, read my stuff for Pro Football Network. All of that's cool.
I thought at some point it was going to be, you can buy me lunch. You can. I mean,
that's fine too.
Just don't Google my address in order to in order to Uber Eats me some Taco Bell.
That feels like a threat, honestly. I'm going to eat the Taco Bell, but I'm just saying, sounds like a threat.
I am going to begrudgingly eat this Nachos Bel Grande. And why did you leave off the sour cream, you monster?
Just fearfully downing a chalupa.
I want so badly to name the episode that, but I'm not going to.
It comes way too late in the episode
today. Too late in the episode. It's not worth it. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back later this week to preview the Saints game. We'll be doing one of those in-person recordings, so that'll be fun. So that is going to be coming up. Again, the live episode is going to be after the Saints game, October 2nd, Antwerp Arms. Check them out, antwerparms.co.uk. Again, link is going to be in the show notes. So check that out. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, as always, that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.